this tutorial, we're going to talk about a transition that's taught very often in yoga, which is either stepping or walking to the top of your mat from downward facing dog. I know that when I started practicing yoga at first, I would just like swing my leg out and around and like slam it on the ground, or grab my whole leg and move it up to the top of my mat. And those are great options. They get you there, but there's so many other ways to land a little bit more fully in the posture and not feel like you're struggling to keep up with class, or like it's taking you a couple extra breaths to get there. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about a couple variations with blocks. So if you have blocks, go ahead and get those. I'll have other options without blocks as well, so don't stress about it if you don't have blocks. These are foam blocks, so they're kind of squishy. My favorite type of block is actually a cork block. So if you have the opportunity to order blocks or to buy some blocks, I recommend cork blocks rather than foam blocks for what I'm going to show you. So in downward facing dog, we send our hips up and back and then walk to the top of our space. But if there's anything in the way or any limited hip mobility or tight hamstrings, it can be difficult to get to the top of our mat. So I'm going to show you a couple different options. I always recommend watching the tutorial first, and then, because I'm like a visual learner, it depends on how you learn, but seeing it first in my body and watching me do it and then trying it on your own, I think is really helpful. So I'm going to start in downward facing dog, and if you're doing this with me, I'll have you start in downward facing dog as well. So I have the blocks at the top of my mat, and I'm setting my hands up directly behind the blocks. Fingers spread nice and wide for downward facing dog. L's of my hands pointing forward, the pointer and index fingers, and then toes tuck under, hips come up and back. So of course, in your down dog at first, walk it out a little bit, bend one knee and the other. We're not looking for super straight legs here. So often we think that we need to have our heels straight on the ground for our down dog to be perfect, like Instagram, but we're actually looking for a little bend in the knees, buoyancy in the knees, and then hips to tilt up and back. So I'll give you an example of what it looks like in my body to not use props or variations stepping to the top of my mat. So if I was in a class and someone were to say, inhale, lift your leg high, exhale, low lunge, foot to the top of your space, right here is as far as my foot can get without my boobs and belly getting in the way. So this is where I would land. Not quite a lunge, more of a step forward. So there are so many different ways to step to the top of your mat. One is stepping wide. So inhale, lift your leg high. Exhale, low lunge. So you can step out here and then heel toe your foot to the center of your mat so your front knee is over your ankle. That's option one, stepping wide. What we want to keep in mind with that is sometimes we tend to whip the leg out and around really quickly, and that can feel not so hot on the knee. So other options include, I always practice with two blocks at the top of my mat. So when I'm practicing, like I said, I use cork blocks, but blocks at the top of the mat have been a game changer for me in terms of transitioning in and out of postures from down dog. So say I'm in downward facing dog, have my hands set up directly behind these blocks, and a teacher were to say, inhale, lift onto your toes, exhale, walk to the top of your mat. Once again, I can get to here before my belly gets in the way. The option instead is to walk your hands on top of your blocks and create a bunch more space to walk forward. I actually practice my downward facing dog on blocks, and you'll see in my Yoga for Larger Bodies workshop as well, there's tons of other options with blocks, but for the purposes of stepping through, what it would look like, so these blocks are slippery, this mat's a little bit slippery. So setting the blocks on the mat and then folding the mat over the blocks makes it so the blocks actually can't move when I have my hands on my blocks. So if I'm in downward facing dog here, hands on the blocks, and someone said inhale your left leg high, exhale low lunge, See how much further my foot gets forward because I have this extra 3 inches of space. Another thing to keep in mind when you're stepping to the top of your mat is that you don't have to adjust your front leg. What I mean by that is, if I step forward from down dog and I lift my leg high and I step to here, I'm not quite where I want to be. It's really hard to pick this leg up and move it. Instead, what you can do if you land here is adjust the back leg. So if I land in not quite a lunge, I can hop my back foot back and land my front knee over my ankle and come to a lunge from there. Other options include, there's so many options. Another option includes ditching the blocks. If you don't have blocks, that's totally cool. I always practice with a blanket in the middle of my mat. So this is great for lowering the knee down, for seated positions, all kinds of stuff. So an option here from downward facing dog, if we're coming to a lunge and it was inhale, lift your leg high, I wouldn't lift my leg. I would set my knees down, step my foot forward. From there, you can keep your back knee lowered or lift to a lunge. So if I'm in a class that's moving and grooving and it has lots of transitions forward to back on the mat, when I hear an instructor say, inhale, lift your leg high, I would take a pause. Or even if you lifted your leg, inhale, lift your leg high, exhale, low lunge, lower the knees, step forward. You get there in the same amount of time as swinging the leg through and stepping into a lunge. So these are all options for stepping forward. In terms of walking to the top of your mat, same thing if belly and boobs or tight hamstrings are in the way. You can either use your blocks, so inhale, lift onto your toes, exhale, walk to the top of your mat. Blocks allow a lot more space. Or you can meet your hands and your feet together in the center of your mat. So what I mean by that is, instead of walking your feet all the way to your hands, walk your hands and your feet to meet in the middle, and then if you'd like to, you can step forward. So what that would look like would be downward facing dog, inhale, lift onto your toes, exhale, walk to the top of your mat. I'm actually walking my hands to my feet a little bit more rather than feet to hands. And then when you come up to standing, you have the option to step forward if you want to, or you can stay at the back of your mat, all good. So that's another option. Also, walking wider. So when someone says walk to the top of your space, instead of trying to walk straight forward where your knees are hitting your belly or your hamstrings are super tight, you can walk wide. So what that would look like is, I'm getting my down dogs in today. Hips up and back. Someone would say inhale, lift onto your toes. Exhale, walk to the top of your mat. You can walk here, then heel toe feet in towards one another. We want to make sure that we get our knees over our ankles in a reasonable amount of time once we've either stepped to the top of our mat or walked to the top of our mat, just because it's healthier for your knees over time. Mass, bone surface over bone makes for healthy joints. So we're looking to do that, but know that you can step wider, you can walk wider, you can lower your back knee to step forward. Another thing that people often work on in the yoga practice is hopping to the top of their space. It's one of my favorite things to do when I'm trying to get some more energy in my practice. So I always use blocks for that because it creates all that extra space. Cork blocks, like I said, are the best. But if I'm in down dog here, and I inhale, lift onto my toes, exhale, travel to the top of your mat. Think of coming down into a little ball, pulling your low belly in, and then hopping. It's okay if your knees land a little bit wide. Then from there, feet parallel to one another. So think of pulling the low belly up and in, and jumping forward. Once again, that's inhale, lift onto your heels. Exhale, travel to the top of your mat. I like to spring back, low belly pulls in, strong core, hop. Top of your mat. All options, none of which are requirements. Keep in mind that blocks are extremely helpful for traveling to the top of your mat. Lowering the knee in a transition. So from down dog, lowering knees to the ground and then stepping forward is an option. Wider stance of your feet to walk up. There's so many different ways to get to the top of your mat from downward facing dog. I hope that some of these tips and tricks were helpful. Know that you can always slide into my DMs on Instagram, send me an email, whatever it is that you need if you'd like other suggestions. Thanks so much for listening.